The Ramayana is an earlier Indonesian book. Part 1. SantoSaba works. Created as a discourse to scientists based on academic studies, in an effort to restore the true history of Indonesia. INDONÉSIARYÄ. By SantoSaba. Exploration and research. Complete info. Waatsap to +62 813 2132 9787. Ramayana. The Nusantara Imperium. First history of Nusantara is not India. Thank you. Alhamdulillah. I was destined by Allah to be able to pour my thoughts on several books, with the intention of re-raising the dignity of this nation, against the general views of our previous nation. My name is Santo. My daily activity is a construction worker. My full pen name is SantoSaba Salomo. During his presentation at the Muaratakas temple he got the additional name Piliong. My books include 1. Borobudur is not a temple. 2. Borobudur True Back History. 3. Clarification of Borobudur historical records. 4. Bali is not India, the original teachings of the archipelago which underlie teachings in India. 5. Lemuria Atlantis Nusantara, humans and early civilizations in the archipelago. 6. Ramayana, the former empire of the archipelago. 7. Mahabharata, historical facts of the previous archipelago. 8. Lemuria is Indonesia. 9. Atlantis is Indonesia. 10. Nusantara is Indonesia. 11. Wana Saka Pala is the original name of Borobudur. 12. Srivijaya pre-Islam. 13. We are Arya, a collection of articles made by SantoSaba. I have to say it now because it will prove to be true. The essence of my book is: humans and early civilizations on Earth were in the archipelago. Almost 3/4 of the Earth's surface was called Lemuria. Far 75,000 years ago, marked by the volcanic disaster of Mount Toba and Mount Sunda. Its progress exceeds current progress by a ratio of 1:7. The current progress 1 over the previous progress is 7. Our previous civilizations have traveled between planets and galaxies. I also say that the moon was made by humans, was made by the ancestors of the previous archipelago. Atlantis uses D Malay. Ad-lantis, not at-lantis, is a newcomer who grew up in the archipelago, experienced his peak at the time of Saba, Solomon, Borobudur. Borobudur was not built by Sailendra nor was it built by Prophet Solomon. Borobudur not based on Hinduism let alone Buddhism. Borobudur has the philosophy of the original teachings of the Indonesian archipelago. Original Dharmak, which until now is perfectly preserved in Bali. The original teachings of the original archipelago which were recorded in Bali today are the underlying teachings in India, growing in India around 500 BC. Rezi Mahavira developed it into Jainism teachings, Rezi Siddhartha Gautama developed it into Buddhism. Hinduism in India recorded by world historians is a teaching that does not have a founding figure. Hinduism in India was named Hinduism in the 9th century AD as a self-existence to distinguish not Buddhism, not Jainism and not Islam. The original teachings throughout the archipelago had to be called Hindu during the New Order era. Historical records about the nation of the archipelago, Indonesia were only recorded in 1 AD, namely the Salakanagara kingdom, all of which was written down the history of this nation with a Western perspective whose dominant person was the colonial country of the Indonesian nation. Where is the historical record before that? There are no historical records of the ancestors of the Indonesian archipelago before 78 AD. This is because we have agreed to count the beginning of the Saka year on the inscription starting in 78 AD. As a result, our history was lost before that year. In this book of mine, I am appealing. Let us review the historical record of our nation. We rewrite it with our own hands. We stop the slapstick of historical records that are not true. True back history Indonesia. Thank you. Saint Saba Solomon. Surabaya, October 2017. Ramayana. The Nusantara Imperium. First history of Nusantara is not India. Table of contents. A. Ramayana in history study. B. Ramayana news. C. Counterversion of Ramayana's story. 1. Modern version of Ramayana. 2. Japanese version of the Ramayana. 3. Chinese version of the Ramayana. 4. The Indian version of the Ramayana. 5. The Indonesian version of the Ramayana. D. Kakawin Ramayana. 1. Kakawin Ramayana, the Kalongwan book by P.J. Zoetmulder. 2. Observations on the Kalongwan version of Kakawin Ramayana. 3. Some of the Kakawin Ramayana translation quotations. The original teachers of Nusantara recorded in Ramayana describe this story as not Indian. The original teachers of the Nusantara recorded in Ramayana are basic on Hindu teaching. 1. Hinduism India. 2. When did the original teachings in Bali become called Hinduism? 3. The history of the original teachings of the archipelago which was forced to change is called Hindu. 4. The original religion of the archipelago. 5. Balinese religion. 6. Ramayana on Prambanan. 7. Danghyang Markandeya. 8. Mpu Ho White. 9. Mpu Kucharan. 10. Mpu Manik Ankaran. 11. Mpu Jaiwaya. 12. Danghyang Dwajendra. F. Awatara. G. Kingdom in Ramayana. H. Names in Ramayana. I. Ramayana news from his original sources in Java. A. Ramayana in history study. Ramayana, which comes from the words Rama and Ayana, which means the journey of Rama. Ramayana is a holy book that has influenced the lives, thoughts and cultures of millions of people before it for thousands of years and ultimately underlies the teachings called Hinduism. History of Rama. There is a real difference between the concept of seeing and understanding history, especially the way of seeing or the concept of thinking in Western and Eastern societies, in this case Asia. In the concept of history, Western society. Considering that physical evidence is needed in seeing a historical event, in this case, the date or time, the place or location where the incident occurred is very important. The discovery of a stone site, an ancient inscription found when excavating an archaeological area, is of higher value and is considered as information, or evidence, of a valid event. Therefore, in the concept of history, Western society does not consider historical evidence if it is only in the form of oral or written stories that exist in the archaeological area. On the other hand, in the history of Eastern society, in this case Asia, an event or history very definitely leaves an impression or is recorded in the memory of a hereditary community where the previous incident actually happened. This is that there is history in the form of oral and written stories. In science, this can be called the epic, the legend of mythos, folklore or whatever it is called, in the area of each of the previous historical events that occurred. And therefore, in Eastern culture, in this Asia, an event or history is considered to have really happened. There is one more difference between the concept of history, Western society, and the concept of history, Eastern society. In Western society, time is seen as a linear line, which has a starting point and an ending point. On the other hand, time in the context of the East Timorese people is a cycle, which has no beginning or end. That is why in Hinduism, time is divided among yuga, manva, and time is immeasurable. Due to these reasons, Western scientists are reluctant to accept Rama as a historical figure and consider Ramayana as a literary work full of mythology. Ramayana and Mahabharata are grouped as itihasa, which means these works are a story about an event or history that has happened long ago. Both of these masterpieces are also full of astronomical data relating to important events. Based on the astronomic estimate, then, an estimated time when the history of the incident occurred can be counted down when it happened. Like when the characters in the Ramayana can be seen when they happened. Rama's birth 4439 BC. Exile of the land of Rama 4414 BC. Rama ascends the throne of Ayodhya 4400 BC. There is an estimated time from other opinions, namely, Rama's birth 4342 BC. Marriage with Sita 4327 BC. Exile of Rama's land 4315 BC. Rama ascends the throne of Ayodhya 4301 BC. Ramayana, which is popular in Asia, are as follows. 1. Kakawin Ramayana, Java. 2. Hikayat Seri Rama, Malaysia. 3. Ramakian, Thailand. 4. Fa Lok Fa Lam and Khvay Tharafi, Laos. 5. Hobutsushu, Japan. 6. Ramasvamedha, Nepal. 7. Janakihirana, Sri Lanka. Ramayana in traditional Indonesian culture, especially in Java and Bali, is related to the tradition of chanting. Sangat is the preparation of a story that has been uniquely known, which is carried out by an artist on the basis of a view of life, standpoint, taste, or certain goals that the artist may have in presenting a story. Mokardi, 2011. The ancient Javanese Kakawin Ramayana only ends with the return of Rama and Sita to Ayodhya. The following sections are removed by the adapters. H. Kern was the first to publish the Kakawin Ramayana in the new Javanese script in 1900. Furthermore, H. Junbal translated it into Dutch. After that, the Ramayana manuscript was widely studied by experts, including W. F. Stutterheim RMNG, Poerbajaraka and C. Hoykas. In the eyes of experts, Ramayana is often seen as one of the sources for knowing India's first relationship with the archipelago. The book mentions the name Yawadwipa as an island of gold and silver. May be referring to the Java island now. The book also mentions Suwarnadwipa, which means island of gold, perhaps what is meant by the island of Sumatra. This is proof that the Ramayana story actually happened in the Indonesian archipelago earlier. The Javanese version of the Ramayana story, which is most popular among the people, is Surat Rama by Jasadipura I, 1729-1802, a poet from the Surakarta court. Ramayana ballet, which is known today, uses Rama's fiber as the source of the story. The story of Ramayana has never been adapted into Malay with the title Hikayat Seri Rama. The Ramayana is inscribed on the Prambanan site and the Panataran site. At the Prambanan site, the Ramayana relief is engraved on the inner balustrade of the Sol site and the Brahma site. This is proof that the Ramayana story actually happened in the Indonesian archipelago earlier. Is there a site outside Indonesia that tells a complete story? The relief is divided into panels, each with 24 panels on the Shiva site and 30 panels on the Brahma site. Each panel is separated by pilaster sculptures. Sometimes a panel contains more than one scene. The Ramayana relief starts from the Shiva site with a story sequence starting from the left side of the east side entrance, going clockwise, and ending on the right side of the east side entrance. Continue at the Brahma site in the order as in the Sol site, starting from the left of the entrance and ending at the right of the entrance. Morchipto et al., 1991. Relief at the Panataran site is less well known, perhaps because the site is located in East Java. Since several years ago, several archaeologists, including Indian archaeologists, have traced the names of places mentioned in the Ramayana, including the Mahabharata, which also contains epics. Research has also been carried out by U.S. archaeologist Michael Cremo in 2003. For 8 years he has been researching the Veda and Jaina scriptures, written by Rev. Valmiki. He found the names written in the book in India. At this point, we are not sure whether the name of the place existed after or before the incident occurred. It could also be that the same place name in the book was made after the book first existed. In other words, the name of a place or city can be made to imitate the name in the Ramayana book. To prove this, physical evidence is needed to prove a place name is true or not as a name in previous historical events. Research by Dr. Rao, an archaeologist accompanied by his team and colleagues in India, reportedly found a very unique bridge in the Palk Strait between India and Sri Lanka. The mysterious bridge connects the two landmasses, namely between Manand Island, Sri Lanka, and Pamban Island, India. The bridge was popular because it was said that it was used by Hanuman soldiers to cross to Alanka in order to free Sita from Ravana's kidnapping. The existence of the bridge is not on land, but under sea water about 1.5 meters. The bridge construction will appear more real when viewed from the air. The bridge is about 30 kilometers long, almost 100 meters wide. This is where the role of science must prove the facts of what is considered history. B. Ramayana News. News about Ramayana events from a previous time. In the explanation below, the author only presents a general summary of the similar stories found in existing works. While there are many differences according to who the author is, the time and area or place the news about the Ramayana is written which will clearly affect. In general, we can find the Ramayana from written sources in the form of books, sources of oral stories and sources that are engraved on the reliefs of previous building sites. Written sources may be biased because of the author's personal subjective factors which are influenced by various things, especially the culture in which the writer lives. Also, oral sources are most likely to have more bias. The source that is sculpted on the relief may experience minor distortion on the condition that the reading or interpretation continues to be based in the relief. Here the author presents 3 stories based in the sources above, and at the end we will see and understand Ramayana, which is based on relief sources on the sites depicted by Ramayana. In this case we will read a lot of reliefs on the Prambanan and Borobudur sites. Ramayana. Starting with a person named Rama Wijaya, namely the crown prince of Prabhu Dasaratha Kosala with his capital, Ayodhya. 3 brothers named Bharata, Laxmana and Satrughna. Rama was born to the empress of Dasaratha named Kausala, Bharata from an empress named Kaikiyasarta, Laxmana and Satrughna from an empress named Sumitra. In a country called Widiha, Manthili, there is a beautiful princess named Dui Shinta, a daughter of the king of the land of Mantili, Prabhu Janaka. One day the king held a Swayamwara competition to get a prince for his beloved daughter, Shinta, and finally the contest was won by the crown prince of the Ayodhya kingdom, named Raden Rama Wijaya. Laxmana is married to Urmila, Sinta's sister. They lived harmoniously since they were teenagers. Rama and Laxmana studied from Wismamitres so that they became tough young men after Dasaratha was old. Rama, who was planned to replace him as king, Kaikeyi reminded Dasaratha's promise that Bharata and Rama should be banished for 15 years. On the basis of that promise, Rama gracefully wandered into the Dandaka forest, even though his mother and Bharata prevented him. His departure was followed by Sinta and Laxmana. However, Rama's departure made Dasaratha sad and eventually died. To fill the empty throne, the royal officials agreed to appoint Bharata as king. But he refused, thinking that the throne belonged to Rama, his older brother. For this reason, Bharata, accompanied by his soldiers and staff, picked up Rama in the forest. When he met his brother, Bharata in tears told about Dasaratha's death and regretted his mother's wishes, for that he and his staff asked Rama to return to Ayodhya and ascend the throne. But Ramaman refused and continued to carry out his father's orders and did not blame his stepmother, Kaikeyi, at the same time persuading Bharata to be willing to ascend the throne. After receiving the shoes from Rama, Bharata returned to the kingdom and promised to run the government as his brother's representative. Many trials were faced by Rama and Laxmana in their journey in the forest. They have to face the giants who are troubling the people around the Kandaka forest. The annoying enemy is Surpanaka, a female giant who wants Rama and Laxmana to marry her. As a result, Laxmana chopped off Surpanaka's nose and ears. Enduring pain and embarrassment, Surpanaka complained to his brother, Rawana, who became a giant in Alanka, while persuading Rawana to seize Sinta from Rama's hands. Prabhu Rawana, a king of Alankadaraja, who is also in love, but not Dui Shinta, but he wants to marry Dui Waidawati. From Rawana's vision, Shinta is considered to be the incarnation of Dui Waidawati that he has been dreaming of. On a journey, Rama and Shinta, accompanied by Esmanadak, were passing through a wilderness called the Dandaka forest. The giant king Rawana stalked the 3 of them, especially Shinta. Rawana wants to kidnap Shinta to be taken to his palace and made a wife. With his trick, Rawana turns his maid named Marikam into a golden Kajankankana. With the aim of luring Rama to go hunting for the golden deer, which is actually Marika, and it is true that after seeing the beauty of the deer, Shinta asked Rama to catch it. Because of the request of his beloved wife, Rama tried to catch the reincarnated deer. Shinta and Laxmana were just waiting. After being left hunting for quite a while, Shinta began to worry about Rama, so asked Laxmana to look for him. Before leaving Shinta alone, Laxmana did not forget to make a protection system to maintain Shinta's safety, namely by making a magical circle. With the condition that there is a circle line, Shinta cannot remove any of her limbs so that her safety is guaranteed, so Shinta can only move to the extent of the circle. After Laxmana's departure, Rawana began to take action to kidnap her, but her efforts failed because of this magical circle. Rawana began to look for other tactics. In his disguised way, namely by turning himself into an old Brahmin and aiming to win Shinta's heart to give alms. It turned out that his strategy succeeded in making Shinta stretch out his hand to give alms. Unconsciously Shinta had crossed the line of the magical circle, which was not allowed to remove the slightest limb. At that time, Rawana grabbed her hand and pulled Shinta out of the circle. Shinta was brought home by Rawanake at his palace in Alenka. While on the way home, there was a battle with a Garuda bird named Jatayu who was about to help Dewey Shinta. Jatayu can recognize Shinta as the daughter of Janaka who is his best friend, but in that battle Ravana can defeat Jatayu. At the same time Rama continues to chase the golden deer and finally Rama manages to shoot him, but the deer turns back into a giant. In his true form, Marika fought Rama so that there was a battle between the two, and in the end Rama managed to shoot the giant. At the same time, Lakshmana managed to find Rama and they both returned to their original place where Shinta was left alone, but when she arrived Shinta was not found. Then they both try to find him and meet Jatayu who is badly injured. Rama suspects Jatayu who kidnapped him and full of emotion he was about to kill him but was prevented by Lakshmana. From Jatayu's statement, they know that it was Rawana who kidnapped Shinta. After telling everything Jatayu finally died, they both decided to travel to Ravana's palace and on the way they met a white monkey named Hanuman who was looking for knights to defeat Subali. Subali is the brother of Sugriva's uncle of Hanuman. The brother seizes his sister's lover, Dewey Tara. In their search for Sinta, Rama and Lakshmana encounter monkey dignitaries named Sugriva and Hanuman. They bind friendship in joy and sorrow. With Rama's help, Sugriva was able to reign in Kiskenda after defeating the tyrant Subali. After that, Hanuman was ordered to help Rama find Sinta. With a troop of monkeys led by Angada, Subali's son, they went to find Sinta. On the instructions of Sempati, Jatayu's brother, they headed to the south coast. To reach Alenka, Hanuman jumped from the top of Mount Mahendra. Arriving at the capital Alenka, Hanuman managed to meet Sinta and report that Rama would soon release her. Upon his return from Alenka, Hanuman reported to Rama. The attack strategy was immediately drawn up. At the suggestion of Wibhasana, Ravana's younger brother who defected to Rama's army, a bridge to Alenka was built. After the bridge was finished, the monkey troops scattered to invade Alenka. Finally, Ravana and his troops were destroyed. Wibhasana was later crowned king of Alenka, replacing his brother who died in battle. Rama was willing to help defeat Subali, and finally the effort was successful with the return of Dewey Tara to become Sugriva's wife. On that occasion, Rama also told that his journey would be continued with Lakshmana to find Dewey Shinta, the wife who was kidnapped by Rawanadi in the Alenka palace. Feeling indebted to Rama, Sugriva offered his help in finding Shinta again, starting by sending Hanuman to the Alenka palace to find out that Rawana was hiding Shinta and knowing the strength of Ravana's army. Argasoka Park is the royal garden of Alenka where Shinta spent her waiting days being picked up by her husband. In the Argasoka Shinta is accompanied by Trihatakmanakan Rawana, besides trying to persuade Shinta to be willing to become Ravana's wife. Because Rawana had asked and forced Shinta to become his wife but was refused, Ravana exhausted his patience, that he wanted to kill Shinta but was prevented by Trajata. In Shinta's sadness at Argasoka garden she heard a song by a white monkey, Hanuman, who was watching her. After Shinta discovered his presence, Hanuman immediately came forward to convey the intention of his presence as Rama's messenger. After finishing conveying his intentions, Hanuman immediately wanted to know the strength of the Alenka kingdom. The trick is to make a mess, namely destroying the beauty of the garden, and finally Hanuman was caught by Indrajitpatara Rawana and then brought to Rawana. Because Hanuman's direction was to be killed but was prevented by his Kumbhakarnatic, because he was considered to be against, Kumbhakarna was expelled from Alenka's work. But in the end Hanuman was still sentenced to be burned alive, but instead of dying, Hanuman burned the Alenka kingdom and managed to escape. Upon his return from Alenka, Hanuman told Rama all the events and conditions of Alenka. After this report, Rama decided to go to attack the Alenka kingdom and was followed by the monkey army led by Hanuman. Arriving at Ravana's palace, a war broke out, where initially the Alenka was led by Indrajit. In this battle Indrajit was defeated by the death of Indrajit. Alenka was pressed by Rama's army, so the wise giant Kumbhakarna was asked by Ravana to become a war senapati. Kumbhakarna agreed but not to defend his angry brother, but to defend Alenkadaraja. In this battle, Kumbhakarna can be defeated and nervous as a hero of his nation. With the death of his younger brother, Ravana finally faced Rama himself. At the end of the battle, Ravana was defeated by all the troops led by Rama. Ravana dies when he hits Rama's heirloom and is crushed by Mount Sumawana brought by Hanuman. After all the terrible battles and defeats on Alanka's side, Rama was able to freely enter the palace and search his beloved wife. Escorted by Hanuman to the Argasoka Park to meet Shinta, but Rama refused because he thought Shinta had been tarnished while Shinta was in the kingdom of Alanka. So Rama asked for proof of his holiness, namely by doing self-immolation. Because of the truth of Shinta's holiness and the help of the god of fire, Shinta was saved from the fire. Thus it proved that Shinta was still holy, and finally Rama received her back with feelings of emotion and happiness. And they returned to the palace. Rama and Sinta and Laxmana and the entire army, including the monkey army, went to Ayodhya. Arriving at the capital of the Kosala state, they were greeted with great fanfare by Bharata, Satrughna, the queen mother, the courtiers and soldiers, as well as all the people of Kosala. Witnessed by them, Rama was then crowned king. C. Counterversion of the Ramayana story. 1. Ramayana modern version. Film. Sampurna Ramayanam, a Telugu N.T. Rama Rao 1958 film, Sampurna Ramayana, a Hindu film, Babubai Mystery 1961, Lava Kusha, a film, N.T. Rama Rao 1963. Kanchana Sita, Malayalam film, G. Aravindan 1977. Ramayana, The Legend of Prince Rama, Japanese and English animated film. 1992. Sita Sings the Blues, an animated film, 2008. Lava Kusa, The Warrior Twins, an animated film based on Atara Kanda, 2010. Ramayana, The Epic, a Warner Brothers animated film. 2010. Sri Rama Rajam, film based on Atara Kanda, Nandamuri Balakrishna. 2011. Yak, The Giant King, Ramayana in Thai animation. Mumbai Musical, a DreamWorks animation film, 2016. Drama, Kanchana Sita, Sakatham and Lankalakshmi, a trilogy by Malayalam writer C. N. Srikanthanair. Lankswaran drama by R. S. Manohar. Television series. Ramayan 1986, originally featured in Doordarshan, a J. Hanuman production, originally featured in Sanjay Khan's Doordarshan and production. Ramayan 2002, original broadcast on ZTV, BR Films. Ramayan 2008, NDTV Imagine. And Interested 2004, science fiction originally aired in Star Plus. Ravana and broadcast on ZTV. Sankatmochan Mahabali Hanuman 2015 on Sony TV. Shah K. Ram, a series from Star Plus starting in November 2015. 2. Japanese version Ramayana. In one other variant, namely the Japanese version of Ramayana known as Hobutsushu, Ramayana or Ramansho, where Hanuman's character is ignored, Suwa Enji no Koto, written in 14th century Japan, Koga Saburo Yorikata, is the youngest child who was in exile caused by his brother. Live. In another variant called Bonenkoku, Tamawaka Rama is a flute player who escapes along with his wife Hamagini, Sita, kidnapping while his captor King Baraman, Ravana, while away to hunt. Other Ramayana stories originating from Japan including Kifune no Hanji, Onzo Shishimawatari and Bukigan, also show the deep fusion of the characters Rama and Ravana. 3. Ramayana Chinese version. In China, the earliest known about the Ramayana is found in the Buddhist text, Ludu Ji Jing. Unlike in Japan, the impact of Ramayana on Chinese society is arguably very influential on the creation of the character of the fictional and popular Monkey King, Sun Wukong, Hanuman, in the Shioji novel which 16th. We can also find characters with the names Dasharatha, Rama and Lakshmana in the 5th century Chinese text, Shishuang Yuan. The Dari ethnic group in the southwestern Yunnan province also knew the story as Lanka Zaihe, 10 Heads of Lanka. The epic also spread to Tibet and Mongolia via Buddhism, with a variant that stands out because it was Bharata, and not Lakshmana, who accompanied Rama in exile. The epic is found on the Malay Peninsula in the form of the Hikayat Maharaja Wana and the Hikayat Seri Rama, compiled in the late 16th century. Among them, The most interesting variant is the relationship between Maharaja Wana, Rawana, and Siti Dewi, Sita, who is the father and biological child. Furthermore, Hanuman the white ape, Hanuman, is also described as the son of Sari Rama, Rama, born to him in his previous life. 4. Ramayana version India. The Ramayana manuscript, which was produced from Rana Jagat Singh of Mewar, 1628-52, is one of the most important documents, namely a painting in 17th century India. Unlike most of the other Ramayana manuscripts, they have not been dispersed as individual paintings into various collections but are still largely intact. The large scale of the project, with more than 400 paintings, allows the artist to focus on telling an epic story at the most grandiose scale. 7 Ramayana books are illustrated in 3 different styles of Mewar painting, including 2 books by Sahib Din, the greatest Mewar artist of the 17th century. 4 of the 7 books and the 5th part are in the British Library. The 2 remaining books are still in India. The 4 volumes of the British Library were given by Rana Bim Singh of Mewar to Colonel James Todd, the Rajput historian, who brought them back to London in 1823. Bim Singh also gave Todd a separate manuscript of the first dated Ramayana book. 1712. They were all acquired by the British Museum in 1844, and from there came the British Library. The Ramayana manuscript by Rana Jagat Singh of Mewar, 1628-1652, is illustrated at its grandest scale so that no important episodes or details are omitted. This necessitated a revival of the ancient, simultaneous narrative method of narrative used in both sculpture and painting. In European or Islamic illustrations, each image usually concentrates on depicting a single episode of the story, but with the Indian method, each image may capture several episodes in the story so that the character appears more than once in the same image. Ramayana in Indian Hindu. In Hinduism in India, Rama, Sanskrit, Rama or Ramakandra, Sanskrit, Ramakandra, is a famous legendary king from India who is said to have lived during the Tretayuga era, descended from the Solar or Surya dynasty. He came from the Kosala kingdom, which had the capital of Ayodhya. According to the Hindu Indian view, he is the 7th avatar of Lord Vishnu who came to earth during the Tretayuga era. His famous heroic figures and stories are told in an ancient Indian Hindu literature called the Ramayana, spread from South Asia to Southeast Asia. Born as a scavenger son of Raja Dasaratha and Kosalawa, he was seen as Maryada Purushottama, which means, perfect human. As an adult, Rama won competitions and became a member of Dewi Sita, the incarnation of Dewi Lakshmi. Rama has twins, namely Kusa and Lawa. There are several versions of the Ramayana story that developed in India. One of the most popular is the Valmiki essay. In the Indian literary book in the 6th and 7th century AD entitled Ravanavada, Ravana's death, which was compiled by Badi's poet, and his literary work is often called the prose version of Badikavyadhan, probably sourced from the Valmiki epos in the last book, Atara Kanda. The Ramayana story written by Valmiki in Sanskrit from India around the year 400 BC, whose story begins between 500 BC to the year 200, and was developed by various authors, which was further developed by other writers, so that there are at least 3 Indian versions of Ramayana stories. The strong and profound influence of the Valmiki version of the Ramayana has given rise to several other Ramayana variants in Sanskrit as well as some vernacular Indian. Among his well-known Sanskrit works are Ananda Ramayana, Adhyatma Ramayana, Adbhuta Ramayana, Yoga Vasistha Ramayana, Tattvasangraha Ramayana and Sangraha Ramayana. Apart from that, the Ramayana story is also present in several Puranas. Several minor Upanishad fruits such as Rama Parvatapaniya, Ramataratapaniya, and Rama Rahasya refer to Rama as Parama Purusha, Lord. Ramayana is popular in other languages which are based on Valmiki's work or adaptations, namely 1. Rama Karita Manasa by Tulasidas, Hindi. 2. Ramayana by Kamba, Tamil language. 3. Ramayana by Kirtivasa, Bengali. 4. Ramakaritam and Kanasa Ramayanam by Saraman and Kanasa, Malayalam. 5. Ramavatar by Guru Gobind Singh, Punjabi. 6. Ranganatha Ramayana, Telugu. 7. Ramakaritra by Girdhar, Gujarati. 8. Saptakanda Ramayana by Sarala Das, Oriya language. 9. Ramayana by Madhava Kandali, Assamese language. 10. Tour of Ramayana by Narahari Kannada. Adhyatma Ramayana. This is a work that is believed to have been produced during the 14th and be a part of the Brahmanda Purana. This work takes the form of a dialogue between Shiva and Parvati which aims to spread the religious cult of Rama. It contains sacred poetry and philosophical works, including the popular work known as Ramagita. Ananda Ramayana. This work is also known as Manohara Ananda Ramayana. This work also takes the form of dialogue, first between Shiva and Parvati and later between Ramadasa and Vishnudasa. This work contains several stories that are still popular, such as the story of Gokarna, a famous place of worship in Karnataka, India, and the story of Ahiravana and Mahiravana. This work is also believed to have been produced in the 14th century. The Emalayam, composed by Tamil Kamban poets in the 12th century AD, is very popular in the southern part of India. In the north, Ramakarat Manas, composed by the poet Awadi Tulsidas, is very popular. Other variations are in Bengali, Malayalam, Telugu, Kannada and other Indian languages. According to the Bhagavad book, the war in Kurukshetra occurred 3,000 years before AD or happened 5,000 years ago and it is a famous reference. The Ramayana stories written by Valmiki are all grouped into Kanda and in the form of verse. The number of verses is around 24,000 verses, divided into 7 parts with the term Sapta Kanda. The parts include 1. Bala Kanda. In this story, Sang Prabhu Dasaratha has 3 wives, empresses along with their children, namely Dui Kausalya with the son of the Lord Rama, Dui Kekayi with the son of Sang Bharata, Dui Sumitra with her sons the Laksamana and Sangsatrughna. Also told of the victory of Ramadeva following the Sasembara in Madala so that she got Dui Sita's wife, the son of King Janaka. 2. Ayodhya Kanda. After Sang Ramadeva succeeded in marrying Dui Sita, then returning from Madala Prabhu Dasaratha wanted to give away the Ayodhyak kingdom to Ramadeva, but was prevented by Dui Kekayi from remembering her promise in the middle of the previous forest. Because of his wisdom Ramadeva went to the forest the next day with his wife Dui Sita, followed by his younger brother, the admiral. At that moment the Bharata heard him. Finally Bharata refused his mother's request, went straight to the forest looking for Ramadeva. Because the Satya discourse true to his words, finally Ramadeva handed over his tarampa, footwear, as a symbol of the Ramas during his journey to the ascetic forest. 3. Its Kanda. After arriving in the forest of Citrakuta, the hermits often visited to ask for help from a giant disturbance. He was also disturbed by the Serpanaka giant because he saw the good looks of the Rama and the admiral, because he couldn't wait to get tempted. Serpanaka's nose was cut off by the admiral. Due to his annoyance, Serpanaka reported to his brother Ravana. Finally, Ravana sent Marika to spy on Ramadan by changing her form into a golden deer. Ramadeva was caught by the Marika trick, because Sita's request for the deer, while Sita was guarded by Laksamana. Because Marika's trick also made Sita panic and ordered Laksamana to help Ramadeva, Sita left alone but with her strength Laksamana had time to draw a line with protective power. Anyone would not be able to get past including the gods. Because of this, Ravana changed his form to Bhikkhu to attract Sita's sympathy. Finally, Sita came out of the protector that Laksamana had made, then Sita was kidnapped and brought to Alanka. 4. Kiskinda Kanda. After Sita was rushed by Ravana to Alanka, Rama and Laksamana did not see Sita in Pasraman and immediately looked for her in the middle of the forest. Arriving on the trip, he met the Jatayu bird, who was seriously injured during the battle to seize and help Sitadari Ravana's hand. Finally Jatayu chose to die. Because of his kindness he was given an incentive to heaven by Ramadeva with an arrow. Then continued his journey, met Sugriva to ask the Bandhuan to defeat Subali in fighting over the goddess Tara. Ramadeva then helped Sugriva to defeat Subali and could be defeated. Sugriva after being safe then helps to return the favor. Rama in search of Dui Sita. 5. Sundara Kanda. In his search for Sita, Hanuman is sent as an ambassador to investigate Sita to Alanka. He manages to meet Sita and tells the story that he will be picked up immediately to Alanka. After telling the story with Sita, Hanuman was arrested, but with his ability to spare himself and had time to burn Alanka until it was charred. Then Hanuman returned to report Sita's situation to Rama. Sugriwa immediately devised a strategy to cross the sea to Alenka by building a bridge called Tidi Banda. 6. Atara Kanda. After the Banda Bridge was successfully built, Sugriwam deployed his Kerosene troops to attack Alenka. There was a fierce battle between the two armies, and a great battle broke out between Rama and Ravana, but was won by Rama. Wibisana also helped. Considering that Wibisana's service was very large, he was finally appointed to be king of Alenka. Then Rama, Sita, and Laksamana accompanied by the monkey soldiers returned to Ayodhya. Arriving at Ayodhyapura, he was greeted by the Sangbharata and immediately crowned as the king of Ayodhya. 7. Atara Kanda. Arriving in the kingdom and having ruled for a long time, a community doubted Sita's existence when Ravana was imprisoned. Finally, Ramadeva ordered Laksamana to take Sita to the forest and was picked up by Maharishi Valmiki while pregnant. Finally, it was not long before Dui Sita gave birth to two twin boys, named Kusa and Lawa. After growing up, he was educated by Maharishi Valmiki in war science, government science, and Ramayana singing. After the adult Kusa and Lawa were heard at Ayodhya, the Aswamedha ceremony was held, which was the release of the decorated horse accompanied by soldiers. Anyone who dared to block the journey would face Ramadeva. Without realizing it, the horse passed Kusa and Lawa. Then he saw the decorated horse, which he took and caught. That's the Indian version of Ramayana. There was a fierce battle between Ramadeva and Kusalawa, and neither won nor lost. This was seen and stopped by Valmiki. Then it was told that they were both sons of Rama. Invited to Ayodhya and crowned as king of Ayodhya. After some time Ramadeva returned to Vishnuloka and Sita returned to Mother Earth. The story of the Ramayana is a holy book for the Vishnu religion in India, whose figures are role models in life, truth, justice, heroism, friendship and love, namely, Rama, Sita, Lakshmana, Sugriwa, Hanuman, Wibisana. 5. Ramayana version Nusantara Indonesia. Ramayana in Old Javanese, Kawi, is not based on Ramayana Valmiki. The Javanese version of the Ramayana, in the ancient Mataram era when King Jaya Balatung, the Sanjaya dynasty reigned, there was a literary book of Ramayana in Old Javanese, Javanese Kawi, not based on Ramayana Valmiki, in short, containing many teachings and beautiful language. During the Kediri era, other books were written, including Hariwamsa and Gatotbaka Sraya by Mpu Panula, Smaradana by Mpu Dharmaja, Lubdaka and Wr Tasankaya by Mpu Tanakung, and Krs Nyana by Mpu Triguna. During the Majapahit era, a number of Bibles were written, namely Negarakretagama by Mpu Prapanka, Sudasoma by Mputantalar, the book Pararatan which tells the history of the kings of Singasari and Majapahit, Sundanese song which tells the story of the Bubat incident, Rangala which tells of the Rangala rebellion, Sarandaka tells the story of the Sora rebellion, and the Javanese Usana book which tells of the conquest. Bali by Gajamata and Arya Damar from Majapahit. Old Javanese Ramayana has two versions, namely Kakawin and prose, which are sourced from different texts. The differences are visible from the end of the story. Apart from the two versions, there are others, namely Hikayat Sri Rama, Rama Kelling and plays. At the end of the story, there is a striking difference between the two versions of the Old Javanese Ramayana. For the Kawan version, it is said that Sinta suffered greatly because Rama was not immediately accepted by Rama because she was considered tainted. After successfully cleaning himself from the flames, he accepted Sinta. Rama explained that purification must be done to eliminate prejudice against his wife. Whereas in the prose version, it tells how Rama was influenced by his people who doubted Sinta's holiness. Here Sinta, who is pregnant, is kicked out by Rama from the palace. Later Sinta gives birth to two twins, namely Kusha and Lawa. Then this story ends with Sinta being swallowed up by the earth. The story of the Ramayana has many versions with various differences in the content of the story, including in India, while in Indonesia, it is known that around 7 to 8 centuries ago, even though in Indonesia it can be found much earlier, namely before the 2nd century BC. Until now, very popular in Java, is the existence of teachings about how a person should rule a kingdom or country from Rama to Wibisana, known as Asthabrata. The sacred building for worshipping the god Shiva, namely the Prambanan Ramayana relief in question is depicted there. This is evidence that the Ramayana predates the written book about it. Professor Dr. Porbajoraka, an expert on Javanese history and culture, after reading the old Javanese Ramayana book Kakawin, commented, "This is a legacy of Javanese ancestors, which is truly glorious, enough to provide for my spiritual life." In a broad scope, the influence of Ramayana on Javanese life philosophy can be seen from Sastra Jendra, Sastra Setha and Isthabrata. The Ramayana story appears in many versions, including in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Burma, Thailand, China, Indonesia and India. According to Dr. Soewodo S. Wiryanagoro, in Indonesia there are at least 3 versions, namely Ramayana Kakawin, then those which are painted in reliefs on the walls of sites such as Lorjonggrang Prambanan and Penataran, and those that develop in society in the form of leather drama stories, plays, film. D. Kakawin Ramayana. News facts of the history of the archipelago previously recorded in a book called Kakawin Ramayana. This Kakawin or book did not originate from India. We will take a closer look at Kakawin Ramayana based in the book Kalongwan by P.J. Zoetmulder. 1. Kakawin Ramayana based in the book Kalongwan P.J. Zoetmulder Pupa 1, 1-62. At the order of the king Dasaratha, the king of Ayodhya, a sacrifice was offered so that he would be gifted with a child. As a result, the 3 queens gave birth to 4 sons. Kausali gave birth to Rama, Kaikeyi gave birth to Bharata, Sumitra gave birth to Laxmana and Satruna. After they were adults, sage Wiswamitra asked for help from Rama to defeat the giants who had messed with his hermit. Dasaratra allowed him and finally Rama and his sister Laxmana left. Pupa 2, 1-76. Described the mountainous journeys leading up to winter and how they were received at the hermitage. A female giant was able to be defeated, then following an attack from the giants led by Marika, but all of them were able to be repelled. At the suggestion of the Wisma, the brothers headed to Mithila where the king of Janaka held a self-service for his daughter named Sita. No one was able to flex the bow that appeared on the day of birth. But when Rama raised the bow and tried to flex it, the bus broke in half. From the Swayambara, finally Rama had the right to marry Sita. The basics were also invited to attend the wedding. After everything was finished they returned to Ayodhya accompanied by the bride and groom. During the trip, Rama Bharga was confronted, who was warlike and challenged Rama to a power contest flexing his bow. This was easily done by Rama, and finally Bhargava resigned in shame. Pupa 3, 1-89. Dayayodhya made preparations for Rama to be crowned king, but Dasaratha was reminded by Kaikeyi that in a previous agreement the king had promised Kaikeyi, Bharatala who would inherit the throne. Then Bharat was the king of Ayodhya. Dasaratha finally passed away. After burying Dasaratha, Rama, Sita, Laxmana left the palace. On his way followed by Bharata for Rama to return to Ayodhya and lead Ayodhya. But Rama did not want to and asked Bharatala to lead Ayodhya by giving his shoes as a symbol of his power. After receiving an insight from Rama regarding his duties as a king, Bharata excused himself. Pupa 4, 1-76. Rama, Sita and Laxmana continued their journey in forestry. They settled in Sudaksna hermitages and continued their lives as ascetics. Sarpanika, the younger sister of the king of giants, wanders the forest and meets Laxmana. Suparnaka loves and disguises herself as a beautiful woman and offers to be married. Laxmana wanted to avoid the woman by praising Rama. The relaxation then approached Rama with the same suggestion. But Rama explained that Sita was the only one for him and suggested approaching Laxmana who was still single. The second effort made by relaxation was more rough so that Laxmana knew his true nature and finally cut off the tip of the giant nose. Suparnaka screamed in pain and ran away and asked the other 3 giants for reinforcements. But all of them were able to be crushed. Pupa 5, 1-89. Sarpanika complained to her brother Rawana and persuaded her by describing her beauty to go and kidnap her. Rawana asked Marika for help and arranged a strategy to be able to persuade Rama and Laxmana to keep Sita away and become Ravana's prey. Marika disguised herself as a golden deer and passed in front of them. Finally, Sita is fascinated and asks Rama to catch the kidong for Sita. Ramapun finally chases the kidong and shoots at him, When Rama releases his bow and hits the kidong, the screams of the kidong can be heard until Sita's ears. At the same time the kidong disappears. With great worry, Sita thought the scream was Rama's scream. For this reason Sita begged Laxmana to chase after Rama and leave him alone. At that time Rawana disguised herself as a hermit who finally approached Sita and managed to take Sita away by air. Pupa 6, 1-203. A Jatayu bird, who was once a friend of Rama's father, heard Sita's scream when he was taken away by Rawana. Jatayu destroyed Rawana's train and supported Sita's body when she fell. With such a heavy burden she was finally defeated by Rawana by cutting off one of Jatayu's wings. Laxmana, who came to Rama, explained to Rama that Sita was missing. Rama was furious and finally they looked for Sita and found Jatayu, who said what had happened before his last breath was breathed. After the Javanese funeral they continued their journey and halfway through they met one of Dwi Sri's units and also Rama freed a hermit because of a curse for his previous actions. They both advised Rama to look for Sugriwa, the king of the monkeys, and asked for his help, who was very hurt because Tara, Sugriwa's wife, was taken away by his sister named Bali. After they united they came to Subali's stopover and they managed to defeat and kill Subali. Pupa 7, 1-113. Rama asked Laxmana to go to Sugriwa's place because there was no more news, and finally Sugriwa apologized by sending and spreading monkey troops to all directions. When the monkey troops led by Hanuman felt tired, they found a cave and intended to take a short break in the cave. It turned out that the cave was the palace of Wayamprabha, the daughter of the king of the giants, and they received Hanuman's entourage very kindly. Hanuman and his group took a short break and finally they fell asleep with Danawa's magic and woke up 1 month later. Hanuman and his troops felt guilty and wanted to die, but they were comforted by Simpati, Jatayu's younger brother, and then gave instructions on how to get to Alenka and the Rawana palace. After arriving at the foot of the mountain, Hanuman went alone to the Alenka to investigate the situation in the enemy fortress while his troops enjoyed the beautiful scenery. Pupa 8, 1-214. On the way in the air, Hanuman is faced with several giants and relaxation, but all of them are able to be defeated until finally Hanuman arrives at the city of Lenkadan disguised as a rabbit. In the eastern city of Alenka Hanuman found Sita and saw her very nervous and confused. Sometime later Rawana arrived, who persuaded and seduced her to want to be his wife with the lure of giving her whatever Sita wanted. Sita refuses all the seductions and promises given by Rawana until finally Rawana becomes furious and threatens Sita with her dagger. Rawana goes from Sitak's room, then asks the giants to tease and disturb Sita, but Sita is always protected by Trajata, the son of Wibasana, who is the younger brother of Rawana. After all the giants left, Hanuman came to approach Sita and told what had happened, that he was a messenger from Rama and gave Rama's ring as evidence in eliminating Sita's suspicions. Sita left a letter to Hanuman to give to Rama along with the beads. After Hanuman's task was finished he destroyed the trees in Alenka. Pupa 9, 1-93. After knowing what had happened, Rawana asked the giants to catch and kill Hanuman, but all of them were able to be defeated by Hanuman. After bathing at sea, Hanuman continued his destruction, and now he was facing Indrajit and allowing himself to be entangled by his snake-shaped arrow. Hanuman was brought before Rawana and he asked the giants to kill him, but Wibasana strongly denied that an ambassador was invulnerable. Pupa 10, 1-72. Hanuman praised Rama's virtue until he asked for a final request that Sita be returned to Rama. Rawana finally gave orders to the giants to burn Hanuman and wrap his tail in flammable material. Pupa 11, 1-96. With his tail burning, Hanuman ran away and jumped here and there, causing the palace and the whole city to catch fire. Hanuman continued his journey to Rama's place and handed over a letter from Sita to Rama. Ramabs and his troops headed for the city of Alenka and surrounded it, as well as Hanuman prepared his plane until he went down to sea. Pupa 12, 1-65. The description of the city of Lenka awakening from its sleep and the giants who gathered to face the king who then appeared. Pupa 13, 1-97. The last one to enter was Wibasana and previously prayed to Shiva and visited his mother, who supported his efforts to advise the king. Rawanapun finally asked all those present which way should be taken. The Padanya advised to continue the war, and Wibisana gave a long and broad description of the rule of a king and asked Rawana to return Sita to Rama. Pupa 14, 1-70. Kumbhakarna defended Rawana. Wibisana warned Rawana that finally Rawana was very angry and Wibisana also resigned. Pupa 15, 1-69. Wibisana joined Rama and was well received. Rama raised his bow and let it go into the sea and made the fish and dragons confused. Varuna, the sea king, advised Rama to build a dam. The monkeys started gathering materials. Pupa 16, 1-47. Nala made a dam and the monkeys crossed it and reached Mount Samela. Pupa 17, 1-138. Rawana deceives the seizure by making a copy of Rama's head and showing it to Sita. Rawana seduces Sita by showing her head Rama, but Sita chooses to die like Rama. Trajata met his father Wibisana. There he saw Rama still in good shape with his troops. He came back and comforted Sita by telling her that Rama was still alive. Pupa 18, 1-52. Sukasarana was asked by Rawana to go to the mountains to observe the enemy's movements. He was caught and returned to Lanka and reported to Rawana to take the peaceful road, but this made Rawana even more angry. Pupa 19, 1-131. A description of the war preparations for the monkey troops and the preparations for the war of the giant troops. Pupa 20, 1-80. The monkeys and the one-on-one war giants finally won the monkey army. Indrajit was beaten back, but with yoga he got special strength and got a magic arrow. The arrows that can be wrapped around like a snake wrapped around the bodies of Rama and Laxmana. He was thrown back by Wibisana into the Alenka and reported that Rama was dead. She completes orgies. Fertilizer 21, 1-248. Sita fell unconscious seeing Rama's body lying down. Trajatapun despair. In the morning a sage came from heaven and chanted praises to Rama, and all the knots broke. Their health was restored again by Garuda. Pupa 22, 1-89. Kumbhakarna was awakened from his sleep. After eating with Lahab, Rawana got a heart-stabbing answer because of his own mistakes, but Kumbhakarna still went to the battlefield and fought Sugriva, who was assisted by Hanuman. Sugriva was overridden by mountain rocks and was lifted by Kumbhakarna but was chased by Hanuman. When Sugriva woke up, immediately bit Kumbhakarna's nose until it broke off. Pupa 23, 1-85. Rama and Laxmana entered the battle. Kumbhakarna's armor was destroyed with Laxmana's arrows and then killed with Rama's arrows. Rawanapun regrets and asks Indrajit to jump back and shoot with his stun arrows so that the monkey troops, Rama and Laxmana, fall asleep in battle. Only Wibisana was immune to this poison and asked the monkey commander to go to the Himalayan mountains to look for herb leaves. After getting it, all can be awakened and a big war ensues. Rawana prayed to Lord Shiva and departed in his golden carriage. Fertilizer 24, 1-260. Rama used the arrow given by the god Indra and immediately shot Ravana's 10 necks and heads. There was a great battle until the universe was shaken. Ravana died and Wibisana was sad, but Rama tried to cheer up Wibisana. Pupa 25, 1-117. The contents of this stanza tell about the journey taken during the war. Pupa 26, 1-52. Return to Ayodhya and a great party. 2. Observations on the Kalangwan version of 1.Ramayana. The 1.Ramayana above is based in the Kalangwan book. P.J. Zoetmulder. Let's look at the different interpretations. Surat Rukmawati is stated about the great ritual of Aswamedha which was held by King Dasarata, king of Ayodhya, in order to ask for the birth of a son who became the incarnation of Sanghyang Vishnu. The grand Aswamedha ritual is held in the Madura forest near the Sarayu River, where the Dipa mushroom, the incarnation of Rezi Angira Maharsapaspa. The ritual was witnessed by the allied kings of Prabhu Dasarata and attended by Prabhubasarata from Wiratha. It turns out that the contents of the fiber Rukmawati, there is no term in offering a sacrifice, only the holding of the great Aswamedha ritual which is held in the Sarayu River. In the first step, in the Kalangwan book, this is not the same as the Jendrayana fiber book version of the State Library of the Republic of Indonesia, which contains the essence of the book Kalangwan. After he became an adult, the sage Wiswamitra asked for help from Rama to deal with the giants who messed up the RSI hermitage. On the fiber of Jendrayana's king, it contained the contents like this: Bhagawan Daneswara told King Jendrayana that Atara Kanda when he was young, 8 years old, had been brought by Bhagawan Sutiknayogi to Mount Dandaka to be pitted against the giants of Ravana's army, Dasamukha, who break the hermitage. Here there is a striking difference between the Kalangwan and the fiber of King Jendrayana. In Kalangwan it is known that when Ramayana is asked for help to eradicate the giants, it is when they are adults, but the opposite is true in Jendrayan, which states that at the time of being asked for help, Rama was only 8 years old. In the Kalangwan book in Pupa 2, which tells about the journeys of brothers, namely the Rama and Admiral in the forest and about how they were received in retreat. They can defeat the giant troops led by Pepper. This is also explained in Jendrayan, whose content is more or less the same as in the Kalangwan book in this verse 2, and originally Rama met and became her husband, confiscated. This is also explained in Jendrayan, which contained in the place of the king of Janaka held a self-contest for his daughter named Sita. Nobody could flex the bow that appeared on the day of Sita's birth, but when Rama picked it up and began to flex it, the bow broke in half. And it is clear that Rama, who was destined to be a mate, was confiscated. The essence of these sentences is not far from the contents of the Ramayana story in the Kalangwan book. In Pupa 2 there is something odd when Rama meets Rama Bhagawa, who challenges Rama to pit his strength with him, but in the end the challenger, Rama Bhagawa, is humiliated by Rama. This story is not stated clearly in Jendrayana, so there are still doubts about this story. In the third stanza in the Kalangwan book, it is told that in the Ayodhya state, preparations were made for the appointment of Rama to become a king to replace his father, namely Prabhu Dasaratha. But Rama did not become king, then replaced by his younger brother, because one of the wives of the Dasaratha king asked him to promise that it was his second son who would inherit his throne. Rama, Admiral and Sita left the palace, and finally Raja Dasaratha died because of heartache. It is something that is still in doubt in this story, because in the book of Sarat Suntiknayasa, it is written like this: when King Ramayana got the throne from his father, Prabhu Dasaratha, to become king in Ayodhya, not long after that the throne was asked to return to be replaced by his younger brother named Prabhu Bharata. In the Kalangwan book, there is not a complete explanation of the Ramayana story. In the Javanese literature there is also no, in the book it only describes the versions of the Ramayana story, does not explain the detailed summary of the Ramayana. In stanza 6, actually when read and compared with other references this is a very long story. In Kalangwan's opinion, this only covers the very essence. The 7th stanza looks so different from the other pupas. A prefix like this: it rains, a season that makes you long for a lover. Here are some poetic words, directing our eyes to a sad and amorous atmosphere. In this pupa, Rama asks for help from the monkey king Sugriva to free Sita from Dasamukha. Then the Sugriva prepared his warriors in all directions, and the troops heading south were led by Hanuman. Here it is told that when Hanuman and his troops arrived in the Vindhya mountains, they found a cave, and when they entered it was seen a bright palace. It turned out to be Swayamprabha, the daughter of the king of the giants. The troops were received so kindly that they were bewitched and slept for 1 month, so they all felt hopeless. In this section there is an oddity when compared to the old Javanese text in the SantoSaba 1980 edition, which is written in this way after being translated. 62. Then the troop of monkeys was surprised to see the birds, successively, coming out of a cave. They got up and looked at the birds attentively. 63. And they saw the mouth of a cave, an opening which looked dangerous. But the monkeys were without fear of entering the cave together to seek shade. 64. When the monkeys were inside, they came to a house, white and shining very brightly. They kept going. 65. And met a young girl, very beautiful and well-mannered. The girl was shining like the moon. She was the guardian of the house. 66. With a smile he stepped forward fearlessly, and gave them ripe fruit and water, very clear and fresh. All that is his offering, to the monkeys, sincere and sweet. 67. Then he asked the monkeys, having eaten until they were satisfied, about their aim, and they told the girl frankly. 68. The illustrious Raghawa sent us all to investigate the whereabouts of Janakasuta, who was a prisoner. 69. May we ask who built the cave and the house? Tell us. 70. Also about your parents. What are their nicknames? You are a perfectly beautiful young girl. Who are you? Please say. Quote. 71. Thus the monkeys spoke, asking questions. The slim, wasted girl replied. 72. A giant king, known as the peerless Wiswakarma, built this house and cave. 73. He had passed away to Swarga, was killed by the weapon of the god Indra, because he, the giant, had caused immense damage on earth. 74. I am a giant girl, known as Swayamprabha. The king of the giants is my famous father as Marusawar, I. The difference is visible. In Kalangwan's story, it is said that Swayamprabha bewitched Hanuman and his troops so that they fell asleep for up to a month, but in the Santoso edition it was not explained that way, only Hanuman and his troops had unconsciously forgotten their original purpose of saving Caesar. And in the end the only one who realized was Hanuman, who next he scouted the enemy fortress, while the others just enjoyed the natural scenery. Dipupa 9 and 10 in the Kalangwan book only discusses. Hanuman's whereabouts in Alinka were known to Rawana, so Rawana immediately sent all the giants to kill him, but Hanuman was able to kill him, until the child from Rawana had defeated the god of senses, and finally Hanuman was captured. Rawana immediately ordered the giants to execute Hanuman. In fact, one of the children from Rawana who has become friends with Sita is Wibasana, defying his son's orders on the grounds that Hanuman was immune. But soon Rawana ordered again to the giants to execute Hanuman by burning him alive. This is also not found in other references. The story here is the story that tells of Hanuman, who is also included in this story of Rama. The Ramayana in Kalangwan's book has too many explanations for characters other than Rama. So that from stanza 7 middle to stanza 10 it does not explain or concern the life of a Rama, but rather highlights the character Hanuman. Ramayana is a literary work that uses Old Javanese language. The Ramayana book is thought to have been made during the reign of King Jaya Balatung. He was a king who controlled Central Java and East Java in the year 820 to 830 Saka. This figure is obtained or estimated from the use of language in the Ramayana book itself, which is compared with the songs or inscriptions in Java. The Ramayana book is an earlier Indonesian. Part 1 to Part 2. SantoSaba works. Created as a discourse to scientists based on academic studies and studies, in an effort to restore the true history of Indonesia. INDONÄSIARYÄ. By SantoSaba. Exploration and research. Complete info. Waatsap to +62 813 2132 9787.